The signal arrived in fragments, like the dying breath of a voice stretched thin across the void. At first it registered as static, nothing more than the background noise of space, but a peculiar rhythm caught the ear of Lieutenant Jason Cole as he monitored the deep space relay. His console displayed shifting glyphs, patterns that did not conform to any known encryption or natural phenomenon. The young officer leaned closer, fingers darting across the interface to isolate the anomaly. "Captain, I think you should see this," he said, his tone carrying a weight of restrained urgency. Captain Marcus Hale stepped beside him, tall and broad-shouldered, the presence of a man who had commanded men and machines through war. He studied the dancing lines of code with a practiced calm, his grey eyes narrowing. Years of service had hardened him against surprise, but what appeared before him was unusual even by the standards of deep space patrols. "Origin?" Hale asked. "Unknown, sir," Jason replied, voice crisp but betraying a spark of curiosity. "The signal isn't directed at us. It looks scattered, like it was flung into subspace without proper alignment. Still, it's definitely intentional, structured syntax, repeating cadence." Commander Eric Vance, standing a step behind, crossed his arms. Unlike Hale, whose authority seemed carved from discipline, Vance carried his role with a quiet skepticism, always testing assumptions. "We've picked up ghost transmissions before. Probably some dying probe coughing out its last data." Jason shook his head. "No, sir. This isn't automated. There are fluctuations, inflection patterns. It's someone speaking." The bridge fell into a silence that was not hesitation but focus. Hale gave a curt nod. "Run it through translation filters." Hours passed before the message emerged in fragmented clarity. Words flickered onto the display, half-sentences riddled with gaps, yet the tone was unmistakable: desperation, pleading, terror. The voice belonged not to a machine but to a people. They begged for aid, described annihilation, named an enemy whose syllables resisted the ship's algorithms. Jason exhaled as the fragments concluded. "Whoever they are, they're under attack. They don't think anyone can hear them." "Then how did we?" Vance muttered, though the question was rhetorical. They all knew the answer: chance, the strange fortune of space where signals bent, scattered, and sometimes found listeners never meant to receive them. The weight of the decision pressed on Hale immediately. For him, choices were never abstract, every order rippled through lives. He studied the crew gathered in expectant silence, each man waiting for direction. The United Earth Defense Fleet was not in the business of chasing phantoms, yet this was no phantom. This was a cry for help. "Commander," Hale said, his voice steady, "notify Central Command. Tell them what we've intercepted and request immediate guidance." Vance hesitated a fraction of a second before nodding. He knew what was at stake. Interference in foreign conflicts was a matter governments avoided unless carefully calculated. Too often, the cost outweighed any conceivable gain. The reply from Earth arrived within the day, cautious as expected. Orders were to maintain observation, assess threat potential, and avoid entanglement. It was a directive written by politicians who measured lives in numbers and weighed risks against public favor. Hale read it aloud on the bridge, the words flat, bureaucratic, unyielding. When he finished, silence lingered until Jason spoke. "Sir, if I may. If we're the only ones who heard them, then without us they're finished." His voice carried none of the timidity of a junior officer challenging policy. It was conviction laid bare, the kind of conviction Hale had once possessed as a younger man. Vance exhaled sharply, as though holding back a flood of cynicism. "Lieutenant, noble as that sounds, you don't know what we'd be stepping into. We don't know who sent that call or who they're fighting. We might charge in and discover we've sided with monsters against someone worse." Jason met his gaze with calm defiance. "With respect, Commander, monsters don't beg for help. They don't sound like that." Hale let their words hang. He turned toward the vast stretch of stars beyond the viewport, the silent black that held every secret humanity had yet to face. He weighed the risks, the politics, the cost. But beyond all that calculation, he remembered the oath he had sworn, an oath not just to defend Earth, but to defend humanity's honor among the stars. "Commander Vance," Hale said finally, Prepare the Resolute for departure. We follow the signal trail. The order fell like a stone into deep water, rippling across the crew. Some faces showed pride, others apprehension, but no one questioned it. The captain's word was final. Vance leaned closer, voice lowered so only Hale could hear. Marcus, this isn't a sanctioned mission. We could be accused of reckless intervention. If Command decides to hang someone for this, it won't be me. Hale's lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile. Then let them. History is written by those who show up. The Resolute, pride of the defense fleet, stirred as its engines rumbled to life. She was built for deterrence, for patrols and power projection, not for exploration into the unknown. Yet there was a sense among the crew that this journey mattered more than any patrol, any exercise, any show of force. They were answering a voice that no one else had heard. Jason stood at his console as the ship broke orbit. He felt the hum of the vessel through his boots, the vibration of purpose. He had studied languages and signals all his life, chasing whispers of civilizations humanity might one day encounter. Now, by sheer accident, he had become the bridge between desperate strangers and the only fleet that had listened. As Earth dwindled behind them, Commander Vance lingered by the viewport. You realize, he murmured to Jason, this could all go wrong. We might not be rescuers. We might just be the next names on their casualty lists. Jason did not turn. His eyes remained fixed on the stars ahead, where the broken fragments of the signal beckoned. Or we might be the first proof that humanity deserves to be out here. Isn't that worth the risk? The commander had no answer. Captain Hale remained at the center of the bridge, his presence anchoring the uncertainty swirling around them. He had heard the desperation in that alien voice as clearly as the rest, but what struck him most was the silence that followed. No other ships, no other powers had come. Whatever else could be said about humanity, its violence, its ambition, its scars, it had not ignored the call. The stars opened before them, vast and indifferent, yet somewhere within their cold brilliance a people waited on the edge of extinction. Whether by mistake or fate, their plea had reached human ears. The fleet would answer. And so the Resolute drove into the dark, bearing with it a decision that would shape how humanity was seen by the galaxy, whether as opportunists, predators, or something altogether different. The Resolute tore free of hyperspace into a system smothered by silence. The sensors reached first, sweeping across the debris-strewn void, charting fragments of ships scattered like bones in a graveyard. Hulls twisted into grotesque angles, engines split open, habitats reduced to tumbling wreckage. What had once been a thriving colony was now only the echo of slaughter. Captain Hale remained motionless in his command chair as the devastation filled the forward display. The weight of it pressed against the bridge crew, each man measuring the meaning of what they saw. Jason's fingers hovered above his console, but no words came. Commander Vance broke the silence first, his voice low, controlled, but heavy. Looks like we're late. Hale did not move his gaze. Scan for survivors. The order launched the crew into action. Dull beeps filled the air, layered with reports as sensors probed deeper. For a long moment, the void answered with nothing but silence. Then Jason caught a flicker, faint energy signatures clinging to a ruined station half hidden in the shadow of a shattered moon. There, he said sharply. Life signs. Weak, but present. Hale rose, his decision immediate. Bring us closer. Ready medical and containment teams. The station loomed as they approached, its outer hull torn open, atmosphere bleeding into space. A docking maneuver was impossible, so shuttles were dispatched. Jason requested permission to join the away team, insisting his role as translator could not be replicated from afar. Hale agreed, though Vance protested. The commander argued that throwing the lieutenant into an unknown environment was reckless, but Hale silenced him with a look that carried both command and trust. The shuttle shuddered as it latched to what remained of an airlock. Inside, the survivors waited. They were unlike anything humanity had imagined, tall, thin-limbed beings with chitinous armor glistening in the pale light. Their faces were sharp angles of carapace and luminous eyes, their voices high-pitched clicks layered into strange harmonics. Jason's translation software struggled at first, stammering through broken words until patterns emerged. The aliens recoiled at the sight of humans, their bodies rigid, limbs raised defensively. Weapons fashioned from organic material twitched in their hands, aimed at the intruders. The sound of their voices was shrill, panicked. "They think we're with their enemy," Jason translated, his heart pounding as his earpiece scrambled the meaning together. "They believe we've come to finish what was started." The situation teetered on the edge of collapse. One misunderstanding, one twitch of a trigger, and the first meeting between two species would be drowned in blood. Jason dropped his weapon belt to the floor, raising his hands. His voice carried both authority and urgency as he spoke, the translation software echoing his words in broken mimicry. "We are not your enemy. We heard your call. We came to help." The tallest of the creatures hissed, mandibles clicking. Its reply was jagged, uncertain. Jason struggled to keep up. "They say the message was not meant for us. They called for their own, but no one came." Hale, standing behind him, lowered his stance to make himself less imposing. "Then tell them this," he said quietly, his voice carrying iron beneath its calm. "It doesn't matter who they meant to call. We are here now." Jason relayed the words, halting, awkward in translation, but the meaning seemed to land. The aliens, Zerithi, they called themselves, hesitated, their weapons lowering fraction by fraction. Their leader's eyes studied Hale with suspicion carved deep into every movement. "They don't trust us," Jason whispered after a pause. "They say humans are too violent, too quick to fight, too much like the enemy who hunts them. But they admit they have no choice. If we leave, they die." The truth settled over the team with the chill of inevitability. This was not the discovery of new friends or allies, it was stepping into the ruins of a people who saw them as little better than predators. Yet in that fragile pause, when fear hung heavier than hope, Hale inclined his head toward the Zerithi leader and spoke once more. "Then survival will be our common ground. Tell them we will fight beside them, whether they trust us or not." The Zerithi lowered their weapons. Not with acceptance, not with relief, but with resignation. When the survivors were brought aboard the Resolute, the atmosphere aboard shifted. Soldiers trained for combat now found themselves carrying fragile beings through corridors, their carapaces cracked, their bodies frail. The Zerithi watched everything with sharp, wary eyes, recoiling at the sight of human weaponry, flinching at the deep thrum of engines. To them, this ship was a beast made of steel, crewed by men who walked like hunters. In the captain's quarters, Hale convened with Vance and Jason. Reports from the Zerithi confirmed the name of their enemy, the Kryth Dominion. The word alone seemed to tighten the air. The Kryth were described as a war-forged empire, relentless, vast, efficient in annihilation. Colonies burned, fleets shattered, populations harvested. Jason recounted the words carefully, translating the Zerithi's fear into language his superiors could grasp. They expected allies to come. They believed the galaxy would not ignore their cry. But the galaxy has stayed silent. Vance's jaw tightened. "And now they'll expect us to fill that void. We didn't come here to fight their war." Jason looked between them, his youth clashing against their cynicism. "We didn't come here for politics either. We came because they asked for help. That's enough, isn't it?" Hale leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice firm. "Whether by mistake or not, they called us. We have a choice. Leave them to be erased, or stand with them against a force that will one day reach us as well." The commander's eyes hardened. "Or we bleed for strangers and leave Earth vulnerable. We could lose men, ships, everything, for what? A dying people who don't even want us here?" The argument cut deep, but Hale did not waver. His voice was calm, resolute. "If they see us as monsters, then let us be monsters that fight for them, not against them. History won't care about the politics. It will care about what we chose to do when the call came." Jason's gaze dropped for a moment, but he felt the conviction in the captain's words. The room fell into silence, filled only by the hum of the ship. Later, as he walked the corridors, Jason saw the Zerithi huddled together, their fragile bodies dwarfed by steel bulkheads. He heard their strange clicks, fragments of words his translator still struggled to unravel. One phrase repeated often, its meaning simple enough for him to understand without software. A question, whispered again and again, had they summoned saviors or executioners? That night, Hale stood alone on the observation deck, watching the wreckage drift across the void. He thought of the risks, the burden of command, the unblinking eyes of his crew who waited for certainty he could not give. Yet beyond all the doubt, he remembered the voice of the message, the plea that had reached them by chance, or fate. Tomorrow, decisions would have to be made, strategies drawn, dangers embraced. Tonight, there was only the silence of a broken people staring at humanity through eyes that had never known them and already feared them. The captain did not turn when Jason approached, though he heard the younger man's steps. The first sign of the KOITH came as a ripple on the sensors, faint distortions that grew stronger with each passing minute. The Resolute tracked them from afar, reading signatures that told of engines larger and hungrier than those of human design. Captain Hale studied the displays without comment, his silence pressing over the bridge like a held breath. Commander Vance leaned close, his eyes narrowing as the numbers climbed. "They're not scouts," Vance murmured. "That's a war party." Jason kept his attention fixed on the translation feeds pouring from the Zarithi survivors. Their voices trembled, layered with dread as the KOITH signal pulsed across the void. Every phrase Jason parsed carried the same essence, inevitability. To the Zarithi, this was not a battle. It was the end approaching once more. Hale broke the silence. "Battle stations. Lock in intercept course." The order snapped through the crew, practiced hands moving with efficiency born of drills but sharpened now by the reality that this would not be a simulation. Lights dimmed, consoles glowed, and the heartbeat of the ship grew louder in every man's ears. The Resolute surged forward, carrying with it the weight of a decision that could not be undone. The KRYTH ships emerged from the void like predators gliding into view. Their hulls were brutal and functional, all sharp angles and jagged armor, bristling with weapons that glowed faintly in the dark. They flew in formation without hesitation, a pack accustomed to overwhelming their prey. The bridge crew fell into tense silence, the sight confirming everything the Zarithi had described. "They outgun us 2-1, Vance said grimly. "If we engage, we'll be torn apart." Hale's voice was steady. "Then we won't fight on their terms." The opening salvo came as spears of light carving across the distance, energy bolts screaming against the Resolute's shields. The ship shuddered, bulkheads groaning under the impact. Hale's voice cut through the chaos, issuing orders crisp and relentless. The fleet of escorts spread wide, each ship maneuvering to divide the KRYTH formation. Human doctrine was not subtle, it thrived on bold strikes and controlled aggression. Jason gripped his console, forcing himself to focus on communications. He transmitted warnings to the Zarithi survivors hidden deeper in the system, his voice carrying through mechanical filters. The answers that came back were despairing, yet tinged with wonder as they heard the thunder of human war for the first time. The Resolute turned hard, engines flaring, unleashing a torrent of missiles. Explosions rippled across the lead KRYTH vessel, its shields buckling, armor peeling in burning fragments. The aliens faltered for a heartbeat, unused to prey striking back with such ferocity. Hale seized the moment, driving the fleet forward in a storm of fire. But the KRYTH recovered quickly. Their ships countered with coordinated precision, weaving patterns of destruction through the human line. An escort frigate caught the full force of their barrage, tearing apart in a burst of flame and silence. The loss burned across every screen, searing itself into every man's mind. "First blood, Captain," Vance growled. "How many more before this ends?" Hale's expression remained carved in stone. "As many as it takes." The battle became a dance of desperation. Humans fought with reckless courage, pushing their ships beyond safety, forcing the KRYTH into confusion. Where the Dominion relied on overwhelming strength, humanity wielded unpredictability. Suicide drones detonated in swarms, decoys lured enemy fire into empty space, and aggressive maneuvers slashed at their formation. Jason listened to the Zarithi chatter in his earpiece, their voices breaking in disbelief. They had expected humans to cower, to delay, perhaps to flee. Instead, they watched men hurl themselves at giants, willing to die if it meant tearing a wound into their enemy. Their language had no word for such madness. Nor for such defiance. As the engagement wore on, the toll grew heavy. Hull plates buckled, decks shook with impacts, medics scrambled through smoke-filled corridors. Every strike etched fear deeper into the crew's faces, yet they did not falter. Hale's presence anchored them, his commands delivered with an unyielding calm that allowed no room for doubt. The turning point came when Vance proposed a gamble. "Captain, if we hit their command ship directly, we can break their coordination. But it means pushing through the center of their formation. Odds of survival." He hesitated, unwilling to voice the number. Hale's eyes flicked to Jason, who had remained silent, absorbed in the alien voices streaming into his ears. Jason looked up, his expression pale but certain. "They think we're demons. But if we break the KOITH here, they'll know we're not." Hale nodded once. "Helm, bring us about. Target their command vessel." The Resolute roared into the storm, engines screaming, guns blazing in unrelenting fury. Enemy fire hammered against her shields, tearing at her hull, but she pressed on, carving a path through flame and ruin. When the forward batteries aligned, Hale gave the order. "Fire everything." The volley struck like a hammer, tearing into the KOITH flagship. Explosions cascaded across its spine, energy flickering, armor splitting. For the first time, the Dominion's fleet faltered not from confusion but from fear. Their formation wavered, discipline crumbling as their leader burned. A ragged cheer erupted across the Resolute. The KOITH, relentless predators of countless systems, turned tail and retreated into the dark. The system fell silent but for the hiss of damaged systems and the whispered disbelief of those who had survived. Hale remained standing, his jaw tight. The victory was real, but the cost was carved into every scar of the ship, every missing name in the roster. Vance approached slowly, exhaustion in his eyes. "We won. But this was just a raiding party. If the KOITH come in force, we won't hold." Jason removed his earpiece, his face pale, his voice quiet. "The Zarithi don't understand us. They don't know if they should fear us more than the KOITH. But they've seen something they can't ignore. We fight when no one else comes." Hale looked out through the viewport at the drifting wreckage, his reflection caught in the glass. His voice carried softly, but every man near him heard it. "Then that will be what defines us. Not who we fight, but why." The crew stood among the ruins of victory, blooded but unbroken. The Zarithi whispered in their strange tongue, torn between terror and awe. Humanity had bared its nature, not in words but in fire. Whether the galaxy saw monsters or saviors would depend on what came next. And far beyond the wreckage, deeper in the void, the Dominion was already gathering its strength for war. The days after the battle were filled with repairs, both to steel and to spirit. The Resolute limped through the void, its wounds patched with temporary plating, its engines strained, its crew exhausted. The Zarithi survivors moved quietly through the corridors, their luminous eyes fixed on the humans with a mix of suspicion and wonder. They whispered in tones that Jason struggled to translate, but one word kept repeating. It meant unpredictable, though the nuance carried both fear and reluctant admiration. Hale read every report with a grim expression. The victory had been costly, but it bought only time. Reconnaissance drones confirmed the worst. The KOITH were massing. Not raiders this time, not a probing force, but a fleet large enough to erase what remained of the Zarithi. Once they finished, they would turn their gaze outward. Humanity had stumbled into the path of a storm that would not stop until it consumed all before it. Vance stood across from Hale in the strategy room, his arms crossed, his jaw rigid. "We can't win this fight. Not with what we have. One ship, a handful of escorts, and half our systems limping. If we stay, we die. If we leave, at least Earth remains safe." Hale's eyes never lifted from the projection of the approaching fleet. "If we leave, Earth might be safe for a while. But the KOITH will come. If they devour the Zarithi, they'll grow stronger. And when they find us, no one will be left to answer." Vance's voice lowered. "We're not saviors, Marcus. We're soldiers. We follow orders. And no order sent us here." Hale looked up then, his grey eyes steady. "Orders didn't bring us here. Humanity did. We heard them. No one else came. That means it's on us. Jason had been silent until then, translating Zerithi chatter into fragments on his console. He looked up, his voice quiet but firm. They believe they're already dead. They've lost everything. But when they saw us fight, something changed. They don't know if we're monsters or protectors, but they know we're willing to stand. That's more than they've seen in a long time. The weight of his words filled the room. Vance exhaled slowly, the lines in his face deepening. He did not agree, but he no longer argued. When the KRYTH fleet arrived, it blotted out the stars. Dozens of warships moved in cold formation, engines glowing like embers of a fire that refused to die. The Zerithi gasped in despair at the sight, their voices rising in shrill panic. For them, this was the same nightmare repeating, only larger, darker, inevitable. The Resolute and its escorts stood alone. Outnumbered, outgunned, and already wounded, they faced a force that had crushed empires. Hale stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable. They expect us to break. Let's show them we won't. The battle ignited with a fury greater than any before. The KOH surged forward in waves, their weapons slicing through shields, tearing ships apart with ruthless precision. Human vessels scattered, dodging and weaving, firing everything they had. Explosions rippled across the void, bright scars in the dark. The Resolute fought like a beast cornered, her guns roaring, her engines straining as she slashed through the enemy formation. Missiles struck true, shattering two of the smaller KRYTH vessels, but every victory came at a cost. An escort frigate disintegrated under concentrated fire, her crew lost in a blaze that echoed through the comms before silence claimed it. Jason's hands flew across his console, broadcasting desperate commands, coordinating both humans and Zerithi alike. His translator relayed orders to the alien survivors who operated what little remained of their defenses. For the first time, Zerithi weapons fired alongside human ones, their fragile beams striking KRYTH hulls in tandem with missile barrages. It was a fragile alliance forged in desperation. Yet even as the fight raged, the KRYTH command ship loomed untouched, its bulk dwarfing the Resolute. Hale knew as long as that vessel remained, the enemy's coordination would crush them. He turned to Vance. "We need to take it out." Vance's eyes hardened as he understood what that meant. A direct assault on the flagship was suicide, yet without it, the battle was already lost. He straightened, his voice calm. "Then I'll lead the strike." Jason spun toward him, shock breaking his composure. "Commander, you won't make it back." "That's the point," Vance said, his tone steady. He looked at Hale. "You'll still need a captain when this is over. And someone has to make sure it isn't over before it starts." For a moment, the weight of unspoken words passed between the two men. Hale's jaw clenched, but he gave the smallest of nods. Vance saluted, then turned and left without another word. Minutes later, a shuttle launched from the Resolute, racing through the storm of fire toward the KRYTH flagship. Escorts tried to intercept, but human ships drew them off, sacrificing themselves to open the path. Jason's breath caught as the shuttle vanished into the shadow of the massive vessel. Silence followed. Then, deep inside the KRYTH ship, a flare of light erupted. Explosions tore through its spine, one after another, as Vance's strike crippled its core. The flagship burned, its command network collapsing in chaos. The KRYTH formation faltered, their relentless precision unraveling into confusion. Hale seized the moment, driving the Resolute forward. All batteries, fire. The humans struck with everything left. Missiles, railguns, beams, every weapon hammered the broken enemy. One by one, KRYTH vessels fell or retreated, their formation scattering. The impossible had been achieved. The Dominion was beaten back, at least for now. On the bridge, cheers erupted, but they carried a hollow edge. The cost was carved into every face, every console flashing damage reports, every empty seat where a man should have been. Jason removed his headset, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Commander Vance, he did it." Hale stood at the center of it all, shoulders heavy, but his eyes remained fixed on the stars. "He gave us this victory. We'll make it mean something." As the KRYTH remnants fled into the dark, the The Zarithi survivors gathered in the hangar, their voices rising in a chorus of strange, mournful tones. Jason translated only fragments, but the meaning was clear. They were honoring the human dead as if they were their own. Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Hale stared at the empty chair across from him. He thought of Vance's last look, the weight of his choice. He thought of Jason's fire, of the Zarithi's disbelief transforming slowly into fragile trust. He thought of the message that had started it all, a desperate cry that had not been meant for them. It did not matter anymore. Humanity had answered. The Resolute drifted through the wreckage, battered but unbroken, carrying with it the proof of what mankind could be when faced with the abyss. Whether the galaxy saw them as monsters or saviors was no longer important. What mattered was that when no one else came, humanity had stood. And in the silence after battle, as stars glittered coldly beyond the hull, the surviving crew knew one truth above all: this was only the beginning.